There's a slow-motion shootout in The Long Riders where time seems to fold in on itself, dust hanging in the air like memory, bullets slicing past bloodkin. It's not just a Western. It's a seance disguised as cinema, because what happens when you cast 6 sets of real-life brothers to play 6 sets of outlaw brothers? What happens when the mythology of Jesse James gets filtered through the genetics of Hollywood royalty? Released in 1980, Walter Hill's The Long Riders is a gun-smoked retelling of the Jesse James saga. But it's also a cinematic experiment, one that blurred the line between fact and reenactment, heritage and performance. From the Carradines to the Keaches, from the Quaids to the guests, the film's cast is more than ensemble, it's bloodline. And with that came something eerie, a strange magnetism on screen, as if these men were not merely playing roles but unlocking ancestral memory. Behind its minimalist dialogue and iconic slow-motion violence lies a tangled production history filled with family politics, on-set injuries, studio interference, and a stunt sequence so dangerous it left scars both physical and financial. But there are other truths that never made it into the special features, like the horses that refused to act unless spoken to in 19th century dialect, or the original ending that tested so poorly it was erased forever. This isn't just a story about outlaws. This is the anatomy of a cinematic blood pact. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Long Riders. 1,980. Fact 1. They weren't cast. They inherited the roles. Most ensemble casts are built in boardrooms. This one was born in living rooms. The Long Riders didn't just cast actors, it cast bloodlines. The film's most surreal creative decision was also its most organic, hiring real-life brothers to play the James Younger gang. The Carradine brothers played the Youngers. The Keaches took on Jesse and Frank James. The Quaids stepped in as the Millers. Even Christopher and Nicholas Guest played the Ford brothers. But this wasn't just clever marketing. The project originated with the Keach brothers themselves, who had been developing a Jesse James script long before Walter Hill came aboard. Instead of shopping it to studios, they pitched it directly to other sibling actors, turning the cast into a fraternity of creative control. What emerged on screen was more than authenticity, it was tension. Decades of family dynamics bled into the performances. There were moments during filming when arguments broke out that had nothing to do with the script. A Keach brother reportedly walked off set for hours after a take, angry not at the director, but at his brother's off-script energy. The studio thought it was genius casting, but on set, it sometimes felt like a family reunion held at gunpoint. Fact 2. The horses only responded to 19th century command. To evoke the authenticity of 1800s Missouri, the production went full historical immersion. That didn't just apply to costumes or dialect, it extended to the horses. The trainers hired for the Long Riders were specialists in period-accurate animal handling. The twist? Many of the horses had been retrained to respond only to 19th century cues. Commands like whoa or hup were replaced with era-specific language, some of which the actors had to learn phonetically. David Carradine allegedly spent hours whispering to his horse off camera, attempting to bond through archaic speech. If the actor slipped into modern slang, the horse would freeze or break its mark entirely. The approach paid off visually. The horses didn't just ride, they performed with uncanny realism. But behind the scenes, it was chaos. Several takes were ruined by equine confusion. In one sequence, a spooked horse bolted mid-shot after misinterpreting a command, nearly throwing an actor into a canyon wall. You can choreograph gunfire. You can rehearse stunts, but you can't explain to a 1,200-pound animal that this is all just pretend. Fact 3. The most dangerous stunt wasn't approved by the insurance team. One of the film's most iconic scenes is the Northfield, Minnesota shootout, a balletic explosion of chaos rendered in slow motion. It looks stylized. It wasn't. That sequence nearly derailed the entire production. Why? Because the most critical stunt, an exploding window leap onto horseback, was never cleared by the insurance company. Stunt coordinator Terry Leonard pushed for realism over safety nets. He choreographed the sequence with a live explosion, real glass, and a moving horse, not a stunt rig. The jump was rehearsed twice. On the third take, it went wrong. The stuntman overshot the saddle and was dragged over 20 feet before releasing the reins. He suffered multiple fractures. The footage? It stayed in the movie. Walter Hill later admitted he made a calculated decision to keep the shot, despite the fallout. That moment, he said, was realer than anything we could fake, and that's what the film needed. There are injuries you heal from, and then there are the ones that become part of the film's DNA. Fact 4. The Keach brothers had a secret rule. never break character in front of the crew. During production, Stacy and James Keach made a private pact. They would remain in character on and off camera whenever members of the crew were nearby. This wasn't about method acting, it was about power. By staying in the Jesse and Frank James mindset at all times, they cultivated an aura of intimidation. Even simple script discussions took on a surreal tone. Stacy would speak in 19th century slang. James refused to call people by their real names, addressing them as Marshal or Colonel. At first, crew members thought it was a joke, but as the days went on, the effect became unsettling. A production assistant later said she avoided eye contact with the Keaches entirely, unsure if they were joking or genuinely threatening. One night, an offhand comment about escaping the law turned into a half-hour monologue delivered with such intensity that even the sound guy stopped adjusting his levels. The Keach brothers claimed it helped them stay locked into the time period, but others on set had a different interpretation. They weren't playing outlaws, they were asserting dominance. Fact 5. Walter Hill fired the original composer 3 days before final mixing. Music is often the last layer added to a film. In The Long Riders, it became one of the bloodiest behind-the-scenes battles. Originally, a traditional Hollywood composer had been hired to write a sweeping orchestral score. He turned in a fully completed soundtrack only for Walter Hill to reject it outright, just 3 days before the film's final mix. Hill reportedly felt the music was too heroic and clashed with the film's cold, brutal tone. He demanded something more raw, more regional, something that sounded like it came from the back of a saloon in 1876, not a recording studio in Los Angeles. Enter Ry Cooder. The blues guitarist was given an impossible task: rescore the entire film in 72 hours. He recorded live with period instruments, blending slide guitar with fiddle and harmonica. The result wasn't just a soundtrack, it was an atmosphere. Cooder's score became one of the most haunting elements of the film. The original composer's work? Erased. Not even included in the DVD extras. Fact 6. David Carradine's gun jammed, so he improvised a fist fight. It stayed in the final cut. During one of the saloon confrontations, David Carradine's character was scripted to fire 2 shots and flee. But on take 3, the prop gun misfired. Instead of breaking character or calling "cut," Carradine did something unexpected. He threw the gun, lunged across the table, and punched the other actor square in the jaw. What followed was a brawl that no one had choreographed. Tables overturned, chairs broke, at least one lighting rig nearly toppled. The scene devolved into real chaos, and the camera kept rolling. Walter Hill watched the playback and made a decision: keep it. The footage was gritty, violent, unpredictable, exactly the tone he wanted. Carradine later said the moment felt more honest than anything we rehearsed. The actor he punched? He didn't speak to Carradine for the rest of the shoot. Sometimes, the most authentic moments come from things going wrong. Fact 7. The Northfield shootout used live ammo once. Safety regulations in Hollywood were already strict by 1980. But on one particularly chaotic day of filming the Northfield sequence, that rulebook was quietly ignored. A prop master, frustrated with repeated misfires, reportedly loaded a single rifle with live ammunition just to capture a realistic muzzle flash. The shot was intended to be fired away from cast and crew in a controlled, locked-off direction, but word of what happened quickly spread on set. One actor walked off. A stunt coordinator reportedly threatened to shut down production if it ever happened again. Walter Hill was furious, not because of the safety violation, but because the take was unusable. The sound was wrong, he said. It sounded like war, not cinema. The footage was destroyed. The prop master? Removed from the shoot. No one was hurt. But after that day, every crew member started double-checking the barrels themselves, just in case. Fact 8. The wardrobe team recreated bullet holes from real Civil War autopsies. Authenticity wasn't just a goal, it was an obsession. The film's costume department scoured historical records, museum archives, and military pathology books to find out how 19th century gunshot wounds actually looked on clothing. They found answers in a series of Civil War autopsy photographs, black and white images documenting battlefield deaths in brutal detail. Using those as reference, they replicated the precise fraying, powder burns, and blood patterns on costumes for shootout scenes. Each shirt, vest, and coat with a bullet wound was handmade. The costume designer insisted that even details invisible to the camera, like the shape of entry versus exit holes, be historically accurate. Most audiences never noticed, but if you freeze frame certain scenes, you'll see it. a level of realism that borders on forensic. Its costume design is necromancy. Fact 9. An actor nearly drowned during the river crossing scene, and the cameras kept rolling. Midway through the film, there's a scene where the gang crosses a river on horseback. It looks gritty, visceral, and cold. What most viewers don't realize is that one of the actors actually started to drown during filming. The river was deeper than expected due to overnight rain. As the horses entered the current, one animal panicked, throwing its rider Robert Carradine into the water. The weight of his costume, plus a misfitted holster belt, dragged him under. For a full 7 seconds, he disappeared from view. The crew kept rolling, assuming it was part of the performance until a safety diver leapt in and pulled him out. Carradine emerged coughing, shaken, but insisted on finishing the scene. The footage? Used in the final cut with no edits. The drowning wasn't staged. It was just cinematic timing. Fact 10. One take ended in a real fistfight between brothers. The idea of casting real-life brothers as outlaws seemed poetic. But poetry turns violent when unresolved childhood rivalries resurface under hot lights. During the filming of an intense standoff scene, two of the Carradine brothers, David and Keith, reportedly broke character in the most physical way possible. It started with a disagreement about blocking. Keith accused David of stepping into his light. David shot back, saying Keith was trying too hard to be in frame. The exchange escalated until punches were thrown right in front of the rolling camera. The crew hesitated, unsure if this was improvisation or real violence. Walter Hill let it play out for a few moments before stepping in. Later, the footage was reviewed in silence. The tension, the venom, the chaos, it all felt so true to the characters that Hill was tempted to use it. Ultimately, he didn't. But the fallout lingered. The brothers refused to rehearse together for the next 3 days. And in their next scene, you can see it their eyes not just acting, but remembering. Sometimes, the hardest performances come from being too close to the truth. Fact 11. The final graveyard scene was inspired by a real outlaw's unmarked tomb. There's a quiet moment near the end of The Long Riders, a shot of a desolate graveyard, wind brushing through the grass, as names fade from old tombstones. It wasn't scripted that way. Originally, the scene was supposed to end with a triumphant ride into the hills, but Walter Hill changed it after a visit to a Missouri graveyard. There, he found the unmarked grave of Jim Younger, one of the real-life gang members. No plaque, no flowers, just a weathered patch of earth with no name. Hill was shaken. He returned to set the next day and rewrote the ending, opting for melancholy over myth. The production found a similar location, aged the stones, and shot it with natural light at dusk. It's one of the most haunting shots in the film and a reminder that legends fade, even when bullets don't. That grave still exists. No sign, no tourists, just the silence of history refusing to glorify itself. Fact 12. One of the guns misfired so consistently it became part of the character. The prop team had sourced period-accurate firearms, some replicas, some modified originals, but one revolver assigned to Dennis Quaid's character had a problem. It misfired constantly. Blank rounds wouldn't ignite. The hammer jammed. The trigger stuck. The prop team offered replacements. Quaid refused. He argued that an unreliable gun suited his character, a younger, more nervous outlaw prone to hesitation. So he kept the faulty weapon and began building its flaws into his performance. He'd pause slightly before every shot, glance at the weapon, shake it once. Audiences thought it was intentional nuance. In one scene, the gun fails to fire, and Quaid throws it aside in frustration. That was real. It wasn't planned, but it worked. Sometimes, the perfect character choice comes from broken machinery. Fact 13. The original title was rejected for being too Shakespearean. Before it was The Long Riders, the project had a different name, Blood and Brotherhood. That title appeared on the earliest drafts of the Keach brothers' script, emphasizing not just violence, but the tragic familial undercurrent running through the story. Studio executives hated it. They argued that blood evoked horror, not westerns. Worse, the term brotherhood felt too lofty, like a tragedy ripped from the Globe Theater. Walter Hill was ambivalent. He preferred something leaner, colder. When the studio suggested The Long Riders, Hill agreed, noting it had a double meaning. Not just men who ride together, but men who stay too long outlaws past their expiration date. The old title disappeared, except once. In a 1979 Trade magazine interview, an early teaser ad ran with the phrase, "Blood and Brotherhood rides this fall." The caption was quickly pulled in later printings. Some believe the film might have felt more epic under the original title. Others think it would have died in marketing. Either way, that name is buried just like some of the outlaws it tried to honor. Fact 14. A period photograph sparked an entire subplot but was later cut. During research, the production team discovered a 19th century tintype showing a young woman in mourning dress seated beside what appeared to be a coffin draped in outlaw gear. The inscription on the back read, "To Frank, I kept my promise." No one could confirm its authenticity, but the image haunted the Keach brothers and inspired an entire subplot, a woman secretly aiding the gang after a botched robbery, honoring a childhood pact. They even cast an actress, wrote several scenes, and shot a dusk sequence of her burying a bloodstained coat. But during the editing process, the subplot slowed pacing and confused test audiences. It was removed completely, not a frame remains. The photograph? It still hangs in James Keach's personal archive. Sometimes, the weirdest truths never make it to the final reel. Fact 15. A stunt horse went missing and was found a day later on a nearby ranch. Midway through filming, one of the production's most valuable horses, a highly trained stallion used in multiple chase sequences, vanished overnight. Its handler swore it had been tied up properly. No gate was broken, no prints led away. For a moment, the crew suspected theft. Search parties scoured the area for hours with no luck. The next day, a phone call came in from a private ranch 3 miles away. The horse had simply walked in, wandered into a corral, and begun eating feed like it belonged there. The rancher, bemused, said, "It just showed up and acted like it was home." The crew retrieved the animal, only to discover something strange. It refused to respond to its usual cues for the rest of the week. Trainers believed the horse had been temporarily reset by its detour, responding now only to the rancher's voice pattern. They had to retrain it mid-production. The result? Slight behavioral changes that are visible in the later chase scenes if you know where to look. Not all performances in this film were human. Some had minds of their own. Fact 16. The saloon glass wasn't sugar, it was whiskey-infused resin. Bar fights are a staple of westerns, and breaking bottles over heads is standard choreography. Typically, filmmakers use sugar glass, a harmless, brittle material that shatters on impact. But for the long riders, Walter Hill thought sugar glass looked too fake under low lighting. He wanted something with more weight, more glint, more menace. So the prop department experimented with a hybrid. Resin molded to resemble old whiskey bottles, treated with a thin layer of actual whiskey to create a tacky sheen and more realistic refraction under light. The effect worked until someone got hurt. In one take, a bottle shattered slightly off-center and a resin shard cut the side of an actor's cheek. Blood mixed with stage makeup. Hill didn't yell cut. The actor kept going. The take was used. After that, stunt coordinators adjusted the choreography to strike bottles on hats or walls, not faces. But that moment on screen, it's real. Sometimes, authenticity leaves scars both physical and cinematic. Fact 17. An extra refused to remove his wedding ring, so they wrote it into the scene. In one wide shot of a town crowd, a background actor was spotted wearing a gold wedding band, a detail entirely out of place for an 1,870 seconds outlaw supporter. The assistant director asked him to take it off. The extra declined, citing personal reasons. It had belonged to his late wife. Rather than replace him, Walter Hill made a decision. He instructed the camera operator to do a slow pan past the man and land on his hand. In post-production, he added a line of dialogue off-screen. "That fella there lost everything except that ring." The scene became a quiet, almost unnoticeable beat, a split-second human moment in the middle of chaos. Most viewers miss it. Those who don't often wonder who the man was. He was never credited, but his refusal became a moment of truth in a film obsessed with fiction. Fact 18. Walter Hill used real gunfire recordings from 1,930 seconds bank robberies. Sound design is often invisible, but in The Long Riders, it tells a story of its own. The gunfire in the film doesn't sound like Hollywood blanks. It's dry, echoing, and uncomfortably sharp. That's because some of the audio wasn't recorded on set or even for this movie. Walter Hill had acquired a rare collection of archived FBI surveillance recordings, actual audio captured during Depression-era shootouts with real bank robbers in the 1,930 seconds. The pops, the ricochets, the hollow acoustics, all authentic. Hill instructed his sound team to layer these real gunshots under the staged ones. The effect is subtle, but unnerving. It gives the film a texture that feels less like cinema and more like a documentary with blood on its lens. The legality of using those tapes? Still a gray area, but the result is undeniable. Every bullet in The Long Riders sounds like history whispering through gunpowder. Fact 19. The most famous shot in the film wasn't planned, it was a lighting accident. One of the most iconic images in The Long Riders is a silhouette. The gang riding single file at sunset, framed against burning orange clouds and dust trails rising like ghosts. It looks like a storyboarded masterpiece. It wasn't. The crew had wrapped for the day. Horses were being walked back. The sky, an afterthought. Then the wind picked up. Dust caught the low Sunday. A cameraman who hadn't yet packed up turned and shouted, "You might want to see this." Walter Hill ran to the monitor. No lighting rigs, no prep, just nature aligning with myth. He screamed at the actors to mount up and ride slow. No dialogue, no direction, just movement. They did. That unscripted moment became the centerpiece of the film's trailer, the press posters, and dozens of retrospectives. It embodied everything Hill wanted, haunting Americana shaped by chance. It's proof that sometimes, the best director is time itself. Fact 20. The film was banned from one southern U.S. town for glorifying outlaws. Despite its historical basis and critical praise, The Long Riders never played in a small Mississippi town because local officials refused to screen it. The reason? The film was accused of romanticizing crime and promoting vigilante rebellion. A local sheriff allegedly watched a private reel and concluded that Jesse James and his gang were portrayed as heroes. Church leaders joined in, calling the film dangerous nostalgia. The town's single cinema pulled the booking. United Artists considered sending a representative to smooth tensions. Walter Hill refused, reportedly saying, "Let them keep their ghosts. Ours are louder." To this day, that theater remains one of the few in America that never screened The Long Riders. It wasn't the blood. It wasn't the guns. It was the idea that family could be loyal, even when lawless. Bonus fact, a real descendant of Jesse James was on set under a false name. Midway through the shoot in Arkansas, a quiet older man began showing up near the catering tent. Crew assumed he was local. He never disrupted production, never asked for autographs, he just watched. Always from the same patch of shade, always silent. After a few days, someone asked if he was background talent. He wasn't, but he had a crew badge. A fake one. Turns out, he was the great-grandson of Jesse James, traveling under an assumed name. He had read about the film in a local paper and felt compelled to witness it. When questioned, he said, "I'm not here to correct history. I'm just here to feel it breathe." Walter Hill met him once. They spoke for 10 minutes. No pictures, no interviews. When asked if he approved of the film's portrayal, the man smiled and said, "It's close enough." But he never would have let a camera catch his bad side. Then he vanished. His name never appeared in credits, logs, or studio memos. Only a single production assistant confirmed his identity after cross-checking a genealogy database years later. If true, it means The Long Riders wasn't just about the ghosts of the past. One of them was standing in the shadows the whole time. If these stories made you see The Long Riders in a new light, there's more where that came from. Subscribe for deeper dives into the films that hid their wildest truths in plain sight. And don't forget to leave a comment. Was The Long Riders a gritty portrait of outlaw legacy, or a carefully crafted myth built by Hollywood families? We want to know what you think, and which film you want us to dig into next.